everybody. Reporting to you again from the Glamour City, Hollywood.
We've been looking at the space for during your Qualcomm time as well for a long time. Battery swap is actually a better architecture if you really think about it, because we spend like maybe 2-3 minutes to put gasoline on our cars. That's the expectation that people have, and in consumer vehicles, I think charging is probably okay because we spend 8 hours in our home, 8 hours in the office, so maybe we can charge it up. But for commercial vehicles, when they're on the go, even 30-45 minutes of fast charging is not good enough, and the infrastructure, that type of infrastructure, is hard to put across the board. Whereas a battery swap is the right thing because you can do it in 5 minutes and move on. So this company is focusing on building that kind of not necessarily putting all the battery swap stations, but putting the technology architecture so people can do it. And we believe that's the right way to go. And then there are lots of commercial vehicles that are adopting these things. And then it starts with Asia, Europe first, because there's a lot more of these commercial vehicles, smaller vehicles as well. And then I think US will come next. So that's what Sun Mobility is, and we're very, they're doing very well. They've done millions and millions of miles now in terms of these battery swap stations and usage.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. Today I'm joined by Karthee Madasamy, founder and managing partner at MFV Partners. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So previously, you were a corporate VP and managing director at Qualcomm Ventures for over a decade. Can you talk about some of the investments that you made there?
Yeah, so I joined Qualcomm early 2006, was there till 2017, late 2017. And it was a great time because it was a part of the smartphone era where we started seeing mobile first properties and the evolution of smartphones. So a couple of investments that I made there, which had like significant legacy, would be Waze, which was the first really mobile first property that built the maps and navigation from crowdsourced models, and that got bought by Google. And still lots of users, still decade after being bought by Google, still people use it. The other one is a fingerprint sensor. So we saw a bunch of sensors going into phones. So we invested in a fingerprint sensor company called Validity Sensors, which got acquired by Synaptics. An IoT company called BORQS, which went public. MapMyIndia, they went public as well. So we invested across the board, from data platforms to sensors, semiconductor components, to a full stack system. So it was a great experience. In fact, that the experience there was the one that helped me launch MFV Partners, because we saw the evolution of computing, evolution of sensors and all the components that are getting like cheaper, better by the minute because of the smartphone ecosystem.
Now, going back even further, your background is in product development and including product specifications, whether it's in wireless or telecommunications, and eventually the internet as well. So you've seen many evolutions from the, let's call it Web 1, what we're talking about Web 2, and now we're looking at Web 3, but even more than that. So having gone through those different cycles, you have perspective that perhaps maybe those that are coming out of MBAs and joining, let's say, VCs as associates or principals, don't necessarily have, aside from the recent, let's say, 2 to 3 years. How does those cycles around evolutions and big shifts help you to think about what's coming up next? Phrased differently is, from a venture fund perspective, typical cycle is about 10 years from inception to returning capital, cash on cash. So in this case, both at Qualcomm, but even previously, how does the insights that you gain help you to think through how to look for those opportunities and make sure that the timing is right?
Yeah, it's very interesting that the hard tech or the deep tech provides the foundation on which you build, the next layer of applications, right? So, and it has happened in several cycles now. It's computing as one big, deep tech phenomenon where you, from the microprocessor era to the basics of computing, personal computing, then to internet, then to networking. I remember like in 1998 when we saw the first virtualization demo where you could actually run a Windows PC on a Linux computer, and we're like wondering why do you need that? But that started the process of doing this virtualization, which basically led to cloud computing. So every cycle starts by some technological breakthrough, some deep tech breakthrough, upon which you build stuff. So, in mobility, for example, for Uber to happen, you have to build an entire stack of, location-based services from all the way from GPS to the middleware to then provide applications on top. What I would say is that every one of these things that you see today, or every one of the things that you will see in the next 10 years, it starts with a deep tech breakthrough today. It started the deep tech breakthrough, a technological breakthrough, and then it kickstarts a cycle. So we're in an interesting thing because the last 10 years we've been like basically enjoying the fruits of kind of cloud computing, mobility. All of them has driven basically this whole concept of SaaS or consumer apps and enterprise software. But I think the juice is getting dried out there, right? I think we have basically tapped that thing quite hard. But so what's going to drive the next engine of growth? It's really going to come from some of the stuff that we're working on today, and that's the way we look at it. Like so every breakthrough will kickstart a new industry or new set of investment thesis. And you want to look for that. I think today, when I'm looking at it, whether it is robotics, automation, quantum computing, AI, the next generation of AI platforms, those would drive the next 10 years of growth, not what would drove in the last 10 years of growth. So you see, as a venture investor or even an entrepreneur, you want to be looking at like what's going to drive the next 10, not what just drove the last 10, right? So, yeah.
So it's very interesting. And the reason is that most VCs, and certainly those hybrid hedge funds, as well as private equity that have moved down, like Tiger and SoftBank as an example, but yet at the same time, majority of them, even now, actually are preferring capital efficient business models such as SaaS, such as fintech, such as crypto, Web3, and the list goes on, but not necessarily deep tech. So if you talk to a handful of those, even tier ones, yeah, they kind of dabble here and there in terms of space and maybe even quantum and maybe some climate tech. But for the most part, they really prefer the lighter stuff. And I would say the majority of the VCs that are out there prefer that, and a handful, very few, maybe the ones that's been backed by Bill Gates, maybe a handful in Europe, prefer deep tech. But it's hard. Why do you feel that the mental shift isn't there? And let's just be very honest, are most of the VCs just followers rather than leaders?
SaaS companies raise hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars as well, right? So it's not necessarily they raise $50 million to become a $50 billion property. Let's be clear about that, right? So if anything, we have seen deep tech companies being a lot more capital efficient because of the lack of availability of capital and all those things. And then for go to market and sales, all the SaaS companies raise a lot of money. So I think if you go look through the data, you'll actually find that SaaS companies are not necessarily very capital efficient. They just raise a lot of money, and then it's just a narrative that software companies are capital efficient. So I want to first get that out of the way, right? But I do agree that most people think that way, saying that hey, it's very capital efficient, and then it can be a large asset and all those things, right? So I think that narrative needs to go. But I agree that I've been in the venture business for too long now. I saw it in 2007, Mark Benioff sitting in Always On conference in Palo Alto, trying to convince a group of people that SaaS is the way to go, and nobody believed him. It's not a sustainable model. SaaS or cloud computing or cloud software applications are not sustainable, right? Today we kind of assume that take for granted that it's like somehow it's a truth written in stone, but as recent as maybe 15 years ago, nobody believed it, right? I tend to not agree with the statement that people make that SaaS companies are more capital efficient. Right? That said, there are some fundamental, 25 years ago, all VC funded companies were kind of deep tech companies. If you didn't have proprietary tech, you didn't go to VC, right? I think what has happened, I will also say, is that in deep tech, because you have to build the tech first, then you figure out and go to market, because even the product development takes a little bit of time. And then the early part of it is largely driven by the tech folks. Some of them don't care about what problem are we solving, what solutions could be there. Is this a problem worth solving? Those type of questions, they don't ask that hard questions. So the product market fit sometimes could take longer, right? Which is why people have this notion that, hey, deep tech takes longer time, a lot of capital. It's actually because some of the entrepreneurs, because they're purely techies, didn't care about the market problems per se. But if you're a good entrepreneur, good founder group that actually take into account, okay, what problem are we solving? Why is it relevant right from scratch? I don't think those type of deep tech startups, first of all, need that type of a capital, because the amount of iterations that they do is a lot lesser. And then they are solving a market need. So there is a customer demand right off the bat. So it's some of it is self-inflicted as well, because the people are just building a hammer and then trying to go look for a nail to go hit on. But if you back the right entrepreneurs, right founder group, which always have that in mind, I have not seen deep tech companies taking either a lot of capital or a lot of time either. So that some of that has to be removed as well. So it's upon us to actually back companies that have that vision. So we're not investing in hey, this seems like a cool technology, let's figure it out where it goes. That's not a venture investment, right? So deep tech investors, deep tech founders need to take that market loop into the equation as well. But I think more people are doing that. And in fact, when I'm looking at deep tech startups today, demand is not a problem at all. They all have hey, I have this much interest, I need to build this. I'm very hopeful. I'm very positive. It's just that more people need to understand it. But I do think that in the early stages that, some of us are investing, you need to understand the technology. That may be harder. Whereas if you just try to understand a business problem, maybe easier. So that's another reason why a lot of the new investors that have come into the equation, that come into the business now, tend to gravitate towards kind of, business problems that they can understand versus, if I had to evaluate a battery company, I got to go understand the material science. I got to understand the chemistry of it. Right? The next day, if you're looking at a quantum middleware company, then that understands the physics of it. Right? So it also self-selects a little bit on the early stages, especially. But anyway, those are some of my views on. But I'm happy to stop here and then maybe have a chat on this.
Yeah, so some of these questions I'm asking, because keep in mind my background is in deep tech investing as well, is somewhat rhetorical, but also to bring out some of the bias or the concerns that are expressed by LPs and other investors. So let's talk about the one that you just mentioned, but also related to that is, first and foremost, is when it comes to deep tech, which is a broad spectrum because it really encompasses a lot of things, which is a full stack, right? It's software, it's a hardware, but it's more industrial context to great extent. It's about transformation. Right. So to your point, whether we're talking about biotech and life sciences, CRISPR-Cas9, to the likes of, let's say, the space economy and the various physics and literally rocket science, right, to the new types of sustainability tech, including carbon sequestrations that's taken advantage of carbon tax credit from the Inflation Reduction Act. There's a lot of sophistication and complexities that crosses many technical disciplines and domains. Right. And frankly, the reality is most of the career VCs that come through the traditional Harvard, Stanford, Bain, Booz, and then to one of the tier ones or twos are MBAs, and they're very good at the financial analysis, but they may not be well suited for some of the technical aspects and some of these domain expertise. So that is a real issue. And to your point, there's a self-selection. But then there's also things that other investors and LPs are seeing. So for example, you're seeing in the EV market, Lordstown, Lucid, you name it, all of those, aside from Tesla, really struggling. And even if they are sitting on a pile of almost $1 billion or more, or maybe $500 million. It's not enough capital, and they're struggling. Others were going very fast and advanced around level 4, aspiration to level 4 autonomous vehicle. A lot of them have taken a back seat because of inflation, because of the fact that automotive are prioritizing EV over automation to level 4 and 5, for instance.
Yeah.
And then quantum, the one that's gone to SPAC and public market, have really been dismal and almost to the point of delisting. And you're seeing a lot of SPACs that are either delisting or frankly have gone bankrupt for the most part. There's a lot of these issues. And of course, nuclear fusion, including the likes of Helion and others that are stating 5 years away. Again, there's a lot of disbelief. How do we get through some of these issues that are really hard to solve, even if there's market fit?
Yeah. Look, some of them are market phenomena, right? During the 2021 timeframe when, public market was hungry to take more companies public through SPAC, so obviously, many companies took advantage of that, including deep tech companies, right? So let's be, it's not just the deep tech companies went there. A lot of the software companies went there as well, and they're also struggling as well as the public market sentiment changed, right? So one of the things that when we look at is that, look, deep tech is something that's proprietary tech, right? Like something that's very proprietary, that you build proprietary and it's hard to replicate. There's an IP mode, there's a tech mode. That's what we call as deep tech, right? The two things that we look for is that, look, it cannot be a science project, okay? Science projects, lab stuff needs to be in the lab. Venture capital is not supposed to fund that, right? Venture capital is supposed to fund things that are proven out in the lab, that is ready for commercialization, that's ready for taking that science, proven science, go through the engineering optimization, engineering innovation to commercialize. It's a very clear thinking that it needs to be proven science going through commercialization and engineering innovation, right? I think sometimes people misunderstand that and go deep into some science projects, and then of course, then you don't operate in the venture timeline and things like that, right? So we are very clear about that. Like, we want back science projects. We'll take a proven science and then go commercialize. There's enough of that, right? So let's focus on that. And then when we look at it, we look for like things that can be commercialized in the 5-7 years. Not necessarily exit in the 5-7 years, but reasonable scale of commercialization in the 5-7 years, right? That's supposed to be the funnel, and that's what we focus on, right? And then, there are idiosyncratic issues with, for example, auto market was extremely hard market. So to build a new brand, yes, I think it's fair to say that only one or two can really build a new brand, as a consumer brand. So yeah, Tesla did that well, others struggling and whatnot. That's market, right? Like, how do you build a consumer brand in an area like automotive, which is like 150-year-old industry? So it's understandable. And then, the autonomous vehicle stuff was over-promised in my mind, because, there are regulatory aspects of it, you mixing with every general populace aspect of it. But what is really doing well is what I call as constrained autonomy, which is the robotics, right? Which is industrial robots, warehouse logistics and whatnot, where you don't have to go interact with the regular thing. You're not driving at 100 miles per hour, 60 miles per hour. And there, the adoption is happening really, really well, right? So some of it is a market phenomenon as well, right? So if you overpromise on something that's a lot more complex there, and you underdeliver, but you go through things where it's a big step improvement, but you're not dealing with complex regulatory stuff that works out as well. So some of it is also in my mind, this is how markets are going to evolve, where there has to be lots of experiments, and most of the experiments are actually going to fail. Some of the experiments are going to do well. So I see the failure of some of these companies as a positive thing, forward thing, because you got to try enough experiments, which is why still US, in my mind, is leading the deep tech thing, because we have the opportunity, or we have the infrastructure to go try different experiments. But so anyway, a long-winded answer. As VCs, we are deep tech VCs. Our focus has to be on things that can be commercialized. And then some of the market phenomenon will weed out some of the things that don't work out as well, which is actually healthy for the ecosystem, because we all learn from that. The system learns from that. So yeah.
Let's briefly talk about some of the portfolios in your investment allocation. So PsiQuantum, very familiar with them. Agility Robotics, same here as well. Also, as well as Sun Mobility, Rescale, right. And then if we have time, Erie Green, and anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah. Maybe to start with Agility. Agility is one of the ones that we backed several years ago now. It's really a life's work of the founders. They've been working on this kind of walking bipedal kind of robots since their PhDs. So they've come a long way in terms of how that can be deployed. And then what we realized is that in the industrial automation setting or like warehouse logistics setting, the move towards automation is happening really, really fast. And it was starting to happen when we invested. And we could see there's no really any hurdles to adoption here because there's no other regulatory stuff and all those things. And then the wheeled robots that you see, AMRs, AGVs, and others, they all hit a limit, and then you need a dexterous kind of a human type of a robot that can work along with humans, but also can handle like a lot more dexterous tasks, multi-purpose tasks. And we saw there's no commercializable solution outside of Agility. So we backed that, and then they've done really well. They launched. They did a big launch in March, public launch where they showed up the robots working for several hours continuously at ProMat conference. So they've done really well, right? So this is one of the things that we feel like, it's a breakthrough technology, but it's a very, very, very tight focus on commercialization. It's not technology for technology's sake. It's technology for how do we help and how do we enable the transformation. So that's a company that is a transformative company in our mind. PsiQuantum, I think quantum computing is the way to go, and I think a lot of companies went SPAC, and maybe they're too ahead of the process. There is still more work to be done. So when you go to public market, I think maybe they're not. I don't think the companies are ready for public market. I think PsiQuantum made the right decision to actually stay away from that. So wait till they do more deployments and breakthroughs before they go public. And I think in our mind, that is the right technology that you have to do, photon based or optical based to really scale this up. And they're on the right track to getting there as well. And then, being a private company during that stage is probably the right stuff, even though they had lots of offers, and then, they made the right decision in our mind. And then Sun Mobility, we've been like looking at the space for during your Qualcomm time as well for a long, long time. Battery swap is actually a better architecture if you really think about it, because we spend like maybe 2-3 minutes to put gasoline on our cars. That's the expectation that people have, and in consumer vehicles, I think charging is probably okay because we spend 8 hours in our home, 8 hours in the office, so maybe we can charge it up. But for commercial vehicles, when they're on the go, even 30-45 minutes of fast charging is not good enough, and the infrastructure, that type of infrastructure, is hard to put across the board. Whereas a battery swap is the right thing because you can do it in 5 minutes and move on. So this company is focusing on building that kind of not necessarily putting all the battery swap stations, but putting the technology architecture so people can do it. And we believe that's the right way to go. And then there are lots of commercial vehicles that are adopting these things. And then it starts with Asia, Europe first, because there's a lot more of these commercial vehicles, smaller vehicles as well. And then I think US will come next. So that's what Sun Mobility is, and we're very, they're doing very well. They've done millions and millions of miles now in terms of these battery swap stations and usage. So we're very bullish on them as well, and they're on track to get to a very good scale. Fund 2, the first investment we announced, we have made more investment, but we have announced is Erie Green. That's the one that uses robotics for water conservation. And we saw when we met them, we saw they have a patented technology, very unique, very hard for other people to copy. And then it's in a very fragmented market. Today, we are using still like 50-year-old systems, 75-year-old kind of technologies to do these things. And water is an extremely important aspect of our sustainable survival. So we only have a fixed amount of water that we have to use, and What they've shown is that very easily you can save like 40-50% of the water, and then manage it much better as well, using a proprietary technology, full stack system, kind of to take over a fragmented space and then provide a end-to-end solution that can be easily adopted. So we're very, very happy with that, and they're already selling several thousands of units as well. So so we're pretty bullish on that. And then I think we're continuing to look at stuff in robotics and automation, and on the electrification side. There's a lot of technology that needs to go into the electrification, so we're very focused on that as well. Obviously, there are other areas if you're looking at it, the quantum stack, the AI stack, are areas of interest for us as well. But I think today, just to step back, I think just the amount of deep tech going after so many different industries, this is the most exciting time I feel. Like otherwise, it used to be you build components for other people to consume. That's what deep tech used to be. Now, every vertical can consume these deep tech. It's not just a horizontal platform that just goes into different areas, but it's like you take agriculture, there's a lot of deep tech just addressing that, manufacturing, logistics, a lot of them, space economy, a lot of them, AR, VR, that type of interaction, a lot of them. So I would say this is the most exciting time for deep tech or core tech or hard tech, I would say, in all of my career.
So I'm going to echo on the last point that you made, because we only have just a few minutes remaining, is that I believe one of the key impetus and really the driver for that is essentially the guarantee in effect that comes with the Inflation Reduction Act, and how it effectively secures markets for climate tech as well as carbon credit for carbon sequestration. So that in itself is a very favorable environment that prior to that, if you think about, let's say, Klein Perkins and the early bets that they made in climate tech, too early before any of these kind of quote unquote guarantees were in place, was kind of precarious. But now, to your point, it is a very exciting time for exactly the reasons that we're seeing here in the US, but also in Europe as well.
Yeah.
Now, everybody is going to be asking this question, which is really the question that it's important, because a lot of VCs have moved over to generative AI. Now, whether we agree with it, like it or not, I know for us at Astor Perkins, we've covered liquid neural networks with MIT CISO recently, for instance. Talk about generative AI and how should we be looking at it, and what aspects of it is really euphoria, and what aspects of it is really real from a deep tech perspective?
Yeah, I mean, look, GANs, came out 6 years ago. Ian Goodfellow started the famous paper. So generate the GANs and the whole area is part of deep tech, right? So, and I think the progress that they've made in the last 5-6 years to the point where these large language models can do so well is actually pretty impressive, and it's an impressive deep tech, breakthrough, right? As a deep tech fund, we are actively looking at some of the core areas of that. We came very close to investing in a synthetic data company, structured data company last year, which is being spun out of university research. So for us, it's a continued focus, right? But what we are seeing right now is a little bit of craziness. I think that's the only word to put it, right? I think if you look at just the language models itself, things are changing very fast, and then there is a lot of application layer that's not necessarily defendable, that's not necessarily unique from one person to one company to the other. There's a lot of that happening, and then there is this euphoria to go be part of that happening as well. So we're seeing like crazy amount of capital going into some of these things. In some sense, that's what market is, right? Like you go do all these things and then you weed out all the stuff, and then maybe only one or two or a few things can really survive from this thing. Others will gonna lose money. But what we are seeing is that some sort of craziness to go after these things. But if you really peel the layers of onion, there is significant value add from this GANs generative part for different use cases. There are some fundamental models, defensible things that are there. The rest of it is noise. So we are still focusing on those things, right? Like, what are some of the defendable technology-centric things that are backable? The others, it's going to play out. It's going to play out very, very fast. It's going to play out. where some of them will be successful on the application side, on some of the user side, and then most of them are going to be either a feature or going to get basically competed out.
All right. So with that, today I've been joined by Karthee Madasamy, Managing Partner at MFV Partners. Thanks for joining today.
All right. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.